Hello, my name is Tyler Slyman, and my research project, whenever it comes to the interdisciplinary studies, I'm going to be focusing on the chemical, biological, and the forensic aspect of how the current drug epidemic in the United States is affecting our public communities. And on a chemical aspect, I have selected an article called Drug Addiction Mechanisms in the Brain. And the thesis in this article basically describes how it is believed that drugs that we generally abuse can cause several long term lasting issues whenever it comes to your neural network health. And that is based on the chemical effects of these ingested drugs to a user's brain and how they become dependent through addiction and many other physical aspects in their life. I have selected a second article that looks more in a biological aspect, which is titled Medicinal Chemistry of Drugs Affecting Cardiovascular and Endocrine Systems. And in this article, it is describing more or less the biological aspect in the drug epidemic and how it damages our other internal organs, such as our heart health and our endocrine system health, whenever it comes to the excretion of the byproducts of these chemicals and how the byproducts existing in our body cause damage to things such as our lungs or our heart health throughout the long term run of our biological health. And then the third article I've selected is actually one that takes a more forensic approach. And in this forensic approach article, it is titled From Overdose to the Crime Scene: The Incompatibility of Drug Induced Homicide Statutes with Due Processes. And in this article, it is basically the underlying basis that there was a young woman and a young man who got tied up in a heroin addiction. The man ended up overdosing and passing away from said heroin addiction, and the female did not. So she was left with uh, the after effects of the man's passing whenever it came to her getting investigated by the law and having to go through many different loopholes that she could have easily avoided by not being involved in heroin. And it took her down a path in her life that it is now irreparable due to the effects of drugs. And all of these authors all discuss how the drugs have affected their own interdisciplinary fields of study. And as a whole, they're all addressing what they can do in the long run to basically help solve the drug epidemic that we have currently going on in America. And here I have Carson, who is going to help me by giving me some constructive criticism and asking me some questions. So, what do you got for me, Carson?
So the purpose of your project, is it supposed to be something like basic research or applied research?
So, I will say more in this field of study since I do not have the typical interdisciplinary studies major. I don't have three different minors. In my aspect, it's more of a. I'm sorry. Can you repeat what your parameters were again?
So basic research or applied research? Are you
Okay,
familiar with the
I'd like
difference?
to say this is more applied research because of the the authors of these articles are also working with very renowned and knowledgeable scientists who have these theories based on their own findings that are set in stone concrete. You see the effects that drugs have and the chemicals that they create in someone's brain and the effects that come from those chemicals that they are ingesting, and they have an output. Now, if they are able to take this knowledge that they have gathered and maybe, let's say, create a better rehabilitation system or a medicine that can help those who are chronically addicted come off of a certain substance healthily to where their body can function like a normal person again, then it could very well be applied research because they can take what they already know and they can formulate a solution that can be outputted and help people just become better off without drugs as a whole.
So addiction sounds like it's central to your research.
Right.
Could you just define what addiction entails really quickly?
Addiction, for me, whenever it comes into this field of research, addiction is when someone cannot go without the ingestion of a certain, whether it be drug or an external stimulus, they cannot function without that. Without this drug or external stimulus, they become irritable. Their body can at times not even function. They cannot ingest food. They cannot properly circulate oxygen throughout their body. They become bedridden because of the pain of withdrawals that they go through. It is a series of cons that allow someone to not be able to normally function as a human being in society.
Let's see. So you mentioned that your research project was going to be uh, discussing the current drug epidemic. I was wondering if you could provide some statistics or facts regarding what drugs or how prevalent it is, or what um, populations are most vulnerable to the current drug epidemic.
That is a great question. I will have to do a little bit more digging and research whenever it comes to concrete statistics,
Mm,
but I will say that in my current, I would call it a surface level knowledge. I'm going to dig deeper, but on my current surface level knowledge, I know that the opioid epidemic is at an all-time high in America whenever it comes to, um, which this goes beyond my current discipline, but whenever it comes to the trafficking of fentanyl across our border and into our states, and the I will say more prevalent quote unquote lacing of certain
mm,
substances that were safe but are now no longer deemed to be safe that are being ingested by our youth. You see it in headlines everywhere whenever it comes to people overdosing on synthetic marijuana, which synthetic marijuana should not kill somebody. However,
right.
the chemicals that it is being laced with is now causing fatalities. Things such as this and the ease of access to the certain drugs that people have, it's causing a much younger epidemic than what we have seen in the past. We have much younger people passing away
Mm,
and developing addictions and not being able to function than it has ever been before. Like I said, I will have concrete statistics when it comes to the opioid epidemic soon. I just haven't been able to come across those yet.
right. And so I was wondering, so this seems primarily from the chemical perspective, from a biological perspective, and then there's a forensic perspective as well with that third article. I
Correct.
was wondering if you had considered, or if this research involved something from the sociological perspective, since this is going to impact communities so intensely.
That is very true. I'm sure that with much deliberation and maybe just stepping into a different pair of shoes, so to say,
Mm,
I could find a sociological aspect to this because you're right. It changes the functioning in the interweb of society if you were to help solve addiction or address addiction and help try to fight addiction. It will change the way that people work together. So there's definitely a way that I can see how different, let's say, societies they battle the homeless rate and
mm.
how their employment might go up and whatnot. I'm sure there's a statistic behind that, and I can actually I can open that door to maybe try to find a sociological aspect to this research project because that is something that can very well be implemented.
Well, I think that's everything. It sounds like your research project is pretty solid right now.
Perfect. All right.
Um, yeah, I
Awesome.
have nothing more to add.
I know that all I really have to do, I knew that I had to find some concrete statistics to help back my
Mm,
points. And then maybe a sociological point would be a nice thing to add into there. But other than that, I'll say that I'm so far I'm proud of what I put together and I think I'm going to good places. So
mm.
thank you very much for your help today, Carson.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.